My name is Laura Humphrey. I'm with NYC Clean Heat, and I'm here today with Laura Kraushaar from the New York City Economic Development Corporation and Allison Kling from the City University of New York, CUNY. And we're here to talk to you today about solar thermal, which is a type of technology that utilizes solar energy to heat water, and that's used for space heating and hot water systems in buildings. So first, just a really quick background on what Clean Heat is. It's an initiative through PlaNYC, and it is really an air quality initiative. This is because number 4 and number 6 heavy heating oils create soot pollution, or PM2.5, and this leads to dire impacts throughout our city. As a result, DEP is regulating heavy oils and is phasing them out. Starting in 2012, permits for number 6 are no longer being renewed or issued. Since these are issued on a 3-year basis, so there will be no more number 6 buildings permitted by 2015. The same exact process is going to happen for number 4 just a little bit later, but it's really important to remember that DEP is not going to issue new permits for number 4. So if you are burning number 4 now and you have to replace your burner or your boiler, this phase-out date is going to come a lot sooner than you think. So it's a good idea to start thinking about cleaner heating oils now. So let's do a quick poll for everybody online. What grade of oil does your building use? So just select the heaviest oil if you're managing a portfolio. And if you don't know, that's okay too. Okay, great. So we've got a lot of trades with us today, but also a bunch of 6 and 4 buildings. So this is great that you guys are here. Hopefully you'll be able to learn a lot in this webinar. So as a result of the regulations, the Mayor's Office set up the Clean Heat program, which provides free resources to the buildings burning number 4 and number 6. We provide technical assistance, financial assistance, and we also run a really informative website. We also have the hotlines, the info@nyccleanheat.org email, and also you can call us through 311. And both of those will connect you to our great team of account managers who will work one-on-one with your building to help assess your conversion options. Also, again, if you're having any technical problems hearing or seeing this, that email address will help you out. Something really important to remember about Clean Heat is that it is completely fuel neutral. As long as you're moving away from number 6 and number 4, we will help you with any of the other alternatives. Normally, these are number 2 fuel oil that comes with biodiesel blends, natural gas, steam, and other alternatives like solar thermal, which we're talking about today. So here's another poll. How familiar are all of you with solar thermal systems? And don't be afraid to say that you have no idea what they are. So we're just logging in the results. Okay, so we have a range of experience here, but a lot of people who don't know a lot, which is great. So you've come to the right place, and we can definitely help you understand why this might be a good option for your building. So solar hot water, or solar thermal, has 2 main advantages for a building that's burning heavy oil. First of all, and probably most importantly to everybody on the phone, it can help you lower your energy costs. First of all, this will keep a portion of your energy costs flat because you're incorporating renewables. Solar doesn't change price year to year like oil does, and this will help you better understand and keep some of your energy costs flat year to year. You also are going to increase the efficiency of your entire heating system, which we're going to get into a little bit later. You'll also be able to cash in on some state and federal tax credits if you're a multifamily building or residential building. And also, if you're burning heavy oil now, you're going to have to do a conversion soon. So it really makes sense to do all your heating system alterations at the same time to save yourself time, money, and stress. Because the Clean Heat program is running now, if you're considering a number 2 conversion, there's great incentives and assistance available through the number 2 conversion specialist program that we have. And you could also incorporate Clean Heat financing to help you with your entire project. The other big benefit to think about with solar hot water is that it's going to improve the air quality for yourself, your building, your neighbors, and the entire city. Like we said before, number 6 and number 4 create a lot of soot pollution, and this has some really huge health impacts. And that huge red square around the Empire State Building, that's the amount of air that's saturated by 1 pound of the soot pollution. And the average building that is eligible for clean heat emits over 200 pounds of PM2.5 a year. So it's really, your building really does have an impact, and this is a great way for you to be part of the solution. So talking a little bit more about the efficiencies. So when we're talking about the clean heat buildings, they are larger. They tend to be 40,000 square feet or more, which means that you're really going to think about solar thermal or solar hot water for your hot water load and not necessarily space heating. But this can be huge. Hot water can comprise up to 75% of your year-round heating needs. And in New York City, we see that systems are generally designed to cover 20 to 80% of hot water energy needs. So this is a huge portion of your bill potentially. Also, by incorporating solar thermal, you can maximize the efficiency of your entire heating system by downsizing your space heating boiler, and also by shutting it off during the summer months. And again, with your hot water system, now it's going to be deriving most of its energy from solar, not oil, so there's efficiencies all around. So now we have a little bit of better understanding of what solar thermal is and why it's important for clean heat. I'm going to turn it over to Allison Kling to talk a little bit more about solar thermal technology and what it looks like in New York City.
Thank you, and just thanks again to Laura and the Clean Heat Program for putting this webinar together and for involving us. We're really excited to have this opportunity to share about this great technology, which has, as Laura said, a really strong potential for building up our renewable energy use and reducing air pollution in New York City. I'll just give a quick background. I'm Allison Kling. I'm with the City University of New York. We've been working since about 2006 with the city and the U.S. Department of Energy and several other partners to strengthen the solar market in New York City, primarily to date focusing on solar photovoltaic, which produces electricity, but over the last year and a half, we have turned our attention to solar thermal, which at the moment is a fairly small market in New York City, but as we'll see, there's a huge potential for it to contribute to New York City's energy needs. We have recently published a solar thermal roadmap on our website, which is a link included at the end of this presentation. So I will get into seeing that we had a range of knowledge about this technology. I'll get into just the basics of this technology and how it works. The first point is that solar is not just electricity. When most people think about solar, they think of the PV, net metering, using solar to generate electricity from the sun. This is using solar radiation to heat, as Laura mentioned. So it looks a little different. Generally, the main components of a system are the collector, which is a series of tubes that collect the radiation from the sun and heat up either water or glycol and circulate that through your heating system. It's a much more efficient technology in terms of converting solar energy into usable energy than PV is, so that has a great advantage. At the moment for this presentation, I'll focus on how you can use solar thermal to heat hot water. There are other applications such as space heating, process heat, pool heating, or even there are some cooling technologies that's out there. But at the moment in New York City, it's primarily being used to heat hot water. It's a proven technology, and it's out there, and we should all consider it. There's a basic diagram here if you're more interested in technical details of how these things work. My first suggestion is to speak to an installer, which I'll keep recommending. There are lots of resources out there through our website, through Department of Energy, Clean Heat, and I'm happy to help point you in those directions. So we go to the next slide. We just wanted to include a few visuals of what the solar thermal technology can look like. There are two main types. Both of these serve the same purpose of using the sun to heat a fluid that then circulates through your building's heating and hot water system. And just a point to note that the solar hot water system will never meet your building's entire hot water load, but what it will do is do some of the upfront work so that your boiler and hot water system don't have to work as hard and that you don't have to use as much of your alternative fuel, and that will lower your cost. In terms of how the flat plate versus evacuated tube collectors work, that's really building by building in terms of what you're looking for how you want to use it, in terms of cost, the space available on your use. But they look fairly similar and they both serve the basic same purpose. So the main components, again, are these collectors that are on your roof, all of the piping that goes down to your building system, and then the heat exchanger that connects it all together. So on the next slide now, we've done a very basic run through of the technology. For those on the phone, we can think about which buildings, in which buildings this makes sense to really work from an economical and technical perspective. The first thing to think about, especially with solar thermal as opposed to solar electric, is that you can't store solar thermal energy. With solar electric, if your system is producing more than your building needs, you can sell it back to the grid. Here, you can't store the heat that's coming out of the system. So really the first thing you're looking for is a building that has a very consistent high hot water load. So that's buildings like multifamily buildings, residences, swimming pools, laundries, car washes. That's the first thing you want to look at when you're thinking about a building that can really use the technology on a day-to-day basis and make that payback work. This chart here is just some analysis that CUNY did for the roadmap, looking at percentages of building sectors that are typically suitable for solar hot water. And we used the New York City solar map to see which buildings had enough roof space to get enough solar thermal on there to meet typical loads for those buildings. I'm guessing that the building owners on this call are probably more thinking about the 5 to 12 floor residences. Those are the larger buildings. So it looks like about 60% of those buildings in New York City probably have enough space on their roof to think about solar thermal as an option. On the next slide, there are some other building parameters that you should think about when you're considering solar thermal. Ideally, the under 12-story buildings are better just because then you have shorter piping runs from the roof down to the boiler system. That makes it more cost-effective. Obviously, anything for solar, you want the larger, more unobstructed roof spaces that are south-facing to get more sun and solar radiation, and easy access in the basement for the storage tanks and the equipment that needs to go in. In terms of economics, which is totally relevant for this call, it does make generally more sense at this point to put solar hot water in buildings that are using fuel or electricity, just the way the prices work out and that the payback pencil out. And this pie chart on the right is the same information that was in the first slide, but just in terms of numbers instead of percentages. So we found that there were almost 20,000 5 to 12-story buildings, residential buildings in New York City that probably have good roof space for solar thermal. So there's a big market out there, a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity. And then on the next slide, we looked at, this is, again, all this information is included in the solar thermal roadmap. We looked specifically at the overlap between where clean heat buildings are and where the buildings are that have good solar hot water potential. So if you look at the light purple blocks, those are all the clean heat buildings. The dark purple blocks are clean heat buildings and blocks where at least half of the buildings have suitable roof space for solar hot water. So in a nutshell, there are a lot of places where clean heat buildings can think about solar thermal as a very viable alternative to what they're using now, especially up in the Bronx and upper Manhattan. the basic takeaway is it's a great technology to consider, and it makes a lot of sense geographically for New York City. And now on to the nitty-gritty of how you can pay for this and how you can help support this. As Laura mentioned, it's a great opportunity if you're already thinking about upgrading your system or changing fuels. In my mind, it makes a lot of sense to do all of this at once and install solar thermal as you're already replacing system components or upgrading. There are federal and state solar incentives available right now. There's a federal tax credit, a state tax credit. Right now, NYC, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, they do offer a rebate, which at the moment is only available if you're using electricity to heat your hot water. So for most people on this call, that might not be relevant. However, they are recommending that be expanded. I don't know what the time frame would be on something like that, but it's in consideration. And as Laura mentioned, there's also project financing available to New York State Clean Heat for the main components of the upgrade. On the right, we've done a basic penciling out of what some sample installed costs might look like. Again, this is going to be a very building by building specific cost depending on what your building looks like, what the piping is, how what the labor and installation is going to look like on your building. But this is just to get a range in the ballpark of what it might look like. And to drill down a little further into the paybacks, at the moment we're seeing payback periods within 10 to 17 years for the 12-unit multifamilies in the dark blue. Under the current incentive landscape, if incentives change, that might go lower, but right now it's within 10 to 17 years. However, this chart is considering just a one-off you're putting in solar thermal. I would recommend, as we'll get into a little later, to anyone, this could be a piece of a larger project, which might make it more of a marginal cost and make the payback a little better. So now that I've given a brief overview of the technology and the opportunity in New York City, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Laura Kraushaar from New York City EDC, and she's got some examples of projects that they've completed over the last few years.
Thanks, Allison. This is Laura Kraushaar, an Assistant Director at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And now that Laura and Allison have provided a great background for solar thermal, I thought I'd supplement the conversation with a few examples of some real systems that were installed in New York City and talk a bit about how they performed. So in 2009, the EDC launched a solar thermal pilot program. And we did this to better understand the potential for solar thermal in New York City, as well as to identify any barriers that were limiting growth. The program provided grants of 30% of installation costs, capped at $50,000, to city-based building owners for the installation of solar thermal systems. From 2010 to 2011, 4 systems were installed under the program. On average, it took about 1 month to install the systems, and each system was required to be equipped with performance monitoring equipment. Just to note that all 4 of the systems that were installed under the program were installed to supplement the hot water supply, and the hot water for the buildings overall was being produced by natural gas power boilers. So we selected 4 projects for this program, and they ran across a diverse spectrum of building types and locations. Going clockwise from the top left, we have a 5-story mixed-use residential commercial building in the Bronx, a 5-story new construction mixed-use building in Manhattan, a 2-story community center with an indoor swimming pool in Staten Island, and in the bottom left, a 6-story multifamily commercial building in Queens. And one note about this last building is that they were the only project that used evacuated tube collectors, and also they were formerly using oil to produce their building's hot water, and they transitioned to natural gas as part of this project as well. So as I mentioned, each of the systems were metered. EDC collected performance and financial data monthly over the course of a year following installation. And we also invited participants in the program to join us for a solar thermal roundtable. So using both the data that we collected from the systems as well as participant feedback at the roundtable, we had some general conclusions. On average, the pilot program participants are saving 23% on their energy bills overall, and 40% savings are seen on summer energy costs. The average payback period for the systems in this pilot program were about 5 to 6 years with incentives. And the incentive coverage was both the EDC grant, but also state and federal incentives. Without the incentive, the payback period looks at about 12 to 14 years. On average, the solar therms that were produced by the pilot program systems supplied 31% of the demand for hot water. And in general, we noted that the greatest potential for solar thermal systems would be for buildings that were lower buildings, so about 10 stories or less, that have a high and consistent demand for hot water with sufficient roof space and an unobstructed southern-facing view. The consistent high demand for hot water helps to better make the case for solar thermal, as the avoided energy costs are more significant, particularly if you're displacing oil. And one last note, that pilot program participants did report high soft costs or non-hardware costs as part of their installation, and this is typically associated with the permitting process. This is just a general overview of the pilot program participants, but if you're interested in learning more about the program results and specifics of the pilot site, we do have a white paper on EDC's Solar Thermal Pilot Program website that's available for download for greater information.
Great, thanks for that. And we'll talk about another set of case studies that are coming to us from DCAS, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, that run all the public buildings in New York City. And that DCAS ran a pilot program to install solar thermal in some public buildings that had really high hot water loads, like recreation centers that have swimming pools, like the St. Mary's Recreation Center we're talking about now, and also firehouses. And they were doing this to assess, are they going to roll this out portfolio-wide? So the results of installing evacuated tube system in the St. Mary's Rec Center were immediate. First of all, as we said before, they were able to shut down their space heating boiler in the summertime, and the system is expected to save the city around $30,000 a year in natural gas costs. So of course that would be higher if this was a building running oil. Some things, lessons learned, things to share is that it's really important to get experienced contractors to ensure that the roof is structurally sound for these types of systems to be on, and that in this particular case, the drain-back system, which has to do with how the water is collected and stored, was the most efficient and effective for this application, but that's going to, again, be dependent building by building. So then I'm going to turn it back to Allison to talk about getting started.
Right, thanks. So these are some basic steps you can take to implement solar thermal. Again, coming back to the best place to start is really talking to an experienced contractor who has, experience with this technology and experience working in the city, who can answer technical questions and look at your specific building characteristics and parameters and see what makes the most sense for you. The first place to start is to understand your hot water usage and loads. There are some ASHRAE guidelines on, rules of thumb on how much hot water your building will use based on number of apartments or residences in your building, or what type of building you're using. We can share that after the webinar. Another resource that I wanted to mention, although it's primarily focused on solar PV, is the New York City Solar Map, nycsolarmap.com. And while this gives estimates for photovoltaic only, it at least is a place to start and look and see it does give an example of the solar potential of your roof. So it does not specifically talk about solar thermal potential, but it's a place to look and start to poke around and think about it. Talk to a professional. I'll keep saying that. I believe later on in the webinar there's a link to NYCERDA approved solar thermal installers that are doing work in New York State. So, talk to a few, get some bids, have them come look at your building, see who you're comfortable with. They will take care of all of the paperwork, all of the permitting. If you're getting an NYCERDA rebate, they'll work with them. They'll do the installation. They'll usually have a maintenance contract. So really you can rely on the installer to take care of all of that. The installation timeline and generally actually getting the equipment up on the roof and into your hot water system can take 1 to 2 weeks, not that long. However, as Laura mentioned, the permitting and planning can take a bit longer, up to a few months working through Department of Buildings and getting all your required permits and approvals. And then the last thing is that definitely if you do install solar, hot water, or solar thermal, put your system on the New York City map. We like to see who out there has done this and be an example to your neighbor and show off what you've done. In general, on your team, definitely have someone who knows your building, who understands the physical plant of your building and the heating and hot water system and understands the loads and the usage. Get that NYCERDA approved contractor right away. And also in terms of working with Department of Buildings, you'll need either your contractor or someone on their team to be a licensed professional to submit a permit application. So those are the resources you should have on hand, and there are a lot of resources on next few slides to help you get through that process. So thank you.
Great. So speaking of resources, here's a lot. I know it's a lot of information, but don't fear. You don't have to write down these long websites. The PDF of this will be available on the Clean Heat website next week, and we can also email it to you if you email us at info@nyccleanheat.org. But just to point out a few resources that are here, this is kind of more of the informational stuff. But there's a link here to kind of help you estimate your hot water demand, the link to the NYCERDA approved solar thermal installers, as well as all the information from EDC and CUNY that we've been talking about today. And here's all the links to the incentives that are available, so all the tax credits, and also the financing that's available through Clean Heat in our 2 different programs. So, again, please check that out or contact Clean Heat if you need any help. So before we go over to Q&A, I just want to let everybody here know about some upcoming events that we have. So we were just talking about the St. Mary's Rec Center that was part of the DCAS pilot program. So we actually have a great opportunity to visit that installation, to go up onto the roof and to see what it looks like, to learn a little bit more firsthand. That's happening next week. All the information is there. If you're interested in joining us, RSVP to the info@email. We also have some events coming up in October. We're going to do a second round of a webinar on the number 2 conversion specialist program. So if you missed it in August and you want to learn more about the assistance and incentives that are available for buildings that are converting to 2, feel free to join us on the 17th. Also, it's not on this slide, but later in the month, we will be also presenting on Clean Heat financing at the NYCERDA Multifamily Performance Program Conference. That's upstate New York. So if anyone feels like traveling, we'll see you there.